Crazy time. We were crash editing in my room, in my house, on like rough editing. Like 24/7, with field tapes that were, because it had to be done before we even finished taping. Yeah, we had it had to be ready by, I think the Rushes had to be ready by September, so, you know, we were of course there on July 4th, but before.
And to August 1st.
Yeah.
All big action.
Yeah. So we kept trying to make it, and then at the same time, you know, other people were out in the field and other people were at home editing. And trying to put it together. So, I mean, there could have been a lot. It could have been a more quality videotape, but anyway, whatever it is, it was. This is a great. I had been doing some video with the Somerville Community Access Television Group, and Claire was a member of that. And so it's probably through Claire, come to think of it. I knew Martha, too. I guess I got invited through that. And went to a few meetings at Martha's house, and it sounded really exciting, like something great to do, so.
Wasn't hard to make a decision.
No.
Involved.
Well, it was hard I didn't get to spend that much time at the camp, a couple of weeks. But, because it was hard for me to go there. But one of the things I really liked having done video before, was that it was all women, because since it's a, in media, I mean in video in particular, everything's always on a deadline, and so it seems like the people who already know more end up doing everything, and that's the guys traditionally, or was at least back then. So it was great to have only women involved, because then it just forced us all to figure things out and take the time to figure things out, even if there wasn't time. And so we lost some footage because of it, but we learned a lot because of it. And it was just, also I liked the way we set it up, because we didn't have a hierarchy. So even the way we did the credits, well, it was a big discussion, since the people who finally edited Stronger Than Before, the woman who did it was not really part of our collective. She was mentioned separately, but everything else we did as a whole. So people who were helping with childcare, or serving food while people were working, or doing fundraising, or other functions, you know, getting leaflets out or whatever, they were put in the same alphabetic listing as anybody else who was running a camera. It sort of broke off into subgroups after the Encampment project, the Peace Camp project was finished. And I was part of a group that did a documentary about women in poverty in Massachusetts. And then there was a group that went and documented the International Women's UN and NGO meeting in Kenya. So, and then there was a group that did a project in conjunction with a battered women's shelter. And so I did that for several years, and I'm good friends with some people. Chantal Fujiwara I still see a lot, and she was part of the original crew. Nina DeLuca I had just run into at Whole Foods, and we'd end up talking, and we had been connecting before this. You know, we'd been connecting about various things. And I, kept in contact with Claire and for a long time, but she moved to the West Coast, so we haven't really been in contact since about 99, 2000, somewhere in there. We just sort of lost track. Right. Well, I think Martha Mollison, who was the seed woman for the group, it was her idea. She is a very powerful person in that sense, and I think she's also very good at actually kind of seeding an operation, and then and letting other people take over with it, which is an important thing that most of us aren't too good at. Some people would complain, well, where's Martha? We're doing all this work. You know, but she was there a lot, and she did a lot. But you know, then she moved on. She did a thing on women in the military as well, and but anyway, I think it was partly that, and then partly just a lot of really strong women who were very dedicated to wanting to see this documented. And you know, you would never hardly see it on the news. All these things were going on in Seneca, and they were really amazing, and you would hardly ever see anything on the news. So we wanted to get something on television if we could, and we were able to do that, and also, you know, just show it for the people involved, etc. So it was, I think, and then it was interesting because it was really my first, I think it was basically my first experience with trying to do things with consensus and using a circle and all that good stuff. And there was a definite split in the collective between those who were into process and those who were into product. And of course you need both, and I was sort of right in the middle. Sometimes I'd have people calling me from either side of the divide, you know. I'd have one on one line and one on the other when I was at work, and they'd be in tears or whatever, or angry or whatever, you know, and I'd just be kind of like, I think we kind of need both. But there's a huge tendency I think in media to get into, we need to do this for the product. We need to do this for the product and not pay attention to the process. So I think it's very necessary in particular, in doing video. I had taken some courses at MIT, and my teacher just happened to be really into access. It wasn't really what, you know, I was learning the technical end at MIT, except at that time it was actually back in the Stone Ages. It was like black and white, reel-to-reel porta-packs and hand spacing back, you know, with editing, back spacing, reel-to-reel. So it was a whole different world. And I had mainly gotten into it because I'm a massage therapist, and I wanted, back then, was way back, and at least on the East Coast, it was very, you know, massage was very much confused with prostitution. So I was doing a lot of education and helping people work on each other, you know, and just seated massage on shoulders and neck, etc. We did quite a bit of that to help camera people and stuff after long days. But anyway, so I got into it to document the massage, and then I had this teacher who was really into public access and the whole idea of empowering people to be on the other side of the camera and not just to be sort of sitting in front of the TV in a passive kind of way, and realize what's going on there. So later I actually did work, after having the experience with the Women's Video Collective, I worked for Medford Community Cable and ran their education and their outreach stuff. But at the time I was working for a video company, but I was the office manager, so I wasn't really doing production. And I was doing production through the Somerville Community Access TV and other things like that, but you know, through cable basically. I did everything. I did camera work, I did audio work, I did editing, you know, and I was in on a lot of the earlier editing until they got in sort of doing the 1-inch stuff, and then I was busy, and they were, you know, off. They were working so around the clock that I couldn't do it at that point. But we were begging and borrowing equipment from every place. So when I was sort of the technical person, which is really hilarious, because I wasn't that technical, but compared to a lot of people I was. So I was trying to interface this different equipment, not always successfully, but you know, and I was doing, you know, hooking equipment together, hopefully getting it to work, helping to set things up, getting cables. Like once I remember we went down to some women in Ithaca. We didn't have the right cable, and we got equipment, you know, cables, but we were borrowing and sharing equipment with women from Ithaca. I forget if they were from the community TV station or from Ithaca College or something. Anyway, we were, working cooperatively with other groups to get the right equipment together. And it was kind of funny because, TV stations, regular local TV stations would send crews, and they were told that that men would not be allowed except on the front lawn, on the front porch, I guess it was, of the house.
Yeah, forward of the barn.
Forward of the barn. Anyway, and they wouldn't believe it, so they would send a crew with men, and expect to be able to go and take, do some videoing in the back. And a lot of times, interestingly enough, they didn't have audio people either. So I would end up, they'd send a woman camera person, but they wouldn't have a woman audio person. That seemed to be even rarer than a woman camera person. So I would end up joining in their crew so they could go around back and check out the things that the women had built and how they'd set up the land. And so it was pretty cool.
Right. When you did get to spend time at the camp, what would the day be like for you?
Well, there were usually actions really early at the gates at the base. So we would be up like before dawn basically, and we had a little closet in the house that we kept everything in, and it was packed to the gills. It was only like about 3 feet tall, or the door, and
under the stairs.
Under the stairs, exactly. So we'd be like, that's a lot of what I did, was unpack and pack the closet. And so we'd be getting up and getting the equipment out and getting to the gate and trying to videotape some of the actions, or as many as we could, because they were so incredible. I mean, that was one of the reasons it was so great to do video, because they were so theatrical. The actions were so creative and theatrical that it really deserved to be on video. It needed to be on a visual medium for people to get the feeling for how, the spirit of it, I feel like, and how creative people were. It wasn't just like, that's how you step out of the other paradigm. It wasn't just like, we want peace, like, we'll fight with the people who want war. Although there was some of that. But basically we want to offer a whole different paradigm. We want to look at this in a whole different way. We want to be creative about this. We want to bring in this spirit of creativity and an alternate way to look at things, and come in from this, feminine point of view, the female. We have something to offer here as women. And so that was very good. And then we'd probably try to stumble back and get some breakfast, and a lot of times I was there, it was about 100 degrees and 100% humidity, so we'd just be trying to drag ourselves through the day, eating zucchini, lots of zucchini. Good food though, excellent food. And we were a lot on a lot of meetings, process type meetings at the camp, as well as our own. And so one of the things that we did was talk a lot with the women about when we were actually on the land, as opposed to when we were at the gates, which was of course a public situation. But anyway, we talked among ourselves and then with the general peace camp population about how to be different as a media. How to we kind of felt like a lot of regular media kind of almost rapes its subjects. Like it just, how you zoom in on people really tight who are crying or are in shock, or and that's what people are expected to do for news. In fact, later when I worked at Medford Community TV, there was a woman, we had a woman there from Channel 7, and she was one of the earlier, really good news reporters who was a woman. And she was so used to doing that, and she basically had to do it or she felt she had to do it, and she probably did have to do it if she wanted to keep her job there. So she was so used to just like, it's like sort of like you go in for the kill. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, the language itself tells you something. It's just, you really have to be very aggressive, and you have to get in front if you're going to get the good picture. So that's been an ongoing balancing act, for me, in any kind of media that I've ongoingly done. How do you document and get good stuff that people are going to enjoy seeing, and at the same time not be too intrusive? And so anyway, at the camp we agreed, that's one of the reasons we were wearing these t-shirts, was because this is on the back was women's media, and this was I guess it was separate from the Women's Video Collective. I guess there were other women, you know, who came from other places who were also part of the camp internal media, so to speak.
Right.
And we had our little logo hugging the camera, and or embracing the camera, kind of. And that was to identify, so people knew that when we were taking video or you know, audio or whatever, that we were part of this group, and we would ask people's permission first. And I mean, of course, people have to sign releases anyway, but it was a different process. It was really like saying, is this okay with you? And then they had the right to tell us to leave during certain points, because, you know, we were covering groups who were doing all kinds of processing within certain affinity groups, and all kinds of material was coming up, and not everyone wanted to be on camera. So so a lot of it was just camping, being you know, actually camping, and also trying to do a documentary. So it was, you know, that was really cool. It was really cool that the women had put in all the pipes, you know, for the water, and had set up all the systems to run the place, and that was very powerful to me as well. I mean, I had been enough of a feminist that I knew women could do this stuff, and I'd done some of it myself, but to have a whole community doing it on women's land was just, it was very moving. I didn't expect necessarily to feel that way. I mean, I went out more like, I'm going to document this, and involved in the anti-nuclear issues and feminist issues, but it was very powerful to just be on the land. And I loved not having any men back there. I mean, I was in my early 20s, right, and I didn't, you know, I was kind of like, it's going to be weird having no men around. I was like very happy to have no men around, and you know, it was kind of like if I went to when I went out to the front lawn, it was kind of irritating to have to deal with men. But yeah, it was great. It was the first time I met a lot of women. I met women who were wise women, herbalists and witches, and people who were doing the consensus process. The first time I saw someone, like, it's in Stronger Than Before, you see someone passing a crystal, and so it's sort of I had been introduced to crystals also, but not in that way, in the way that it was being done there, sort of a certain kind of ritual and ceremony, and that was unfamiliar to me. And of course, all the great songs, all the great women's songs.
Do you remember any particular?
Well, Stronger Than Before, of course. I'm trying to remember. We went through a bunch of different possible titles, but we didn't want to have any negatives in the title, so there were some titles that we couldn't use. And it was funny because when we bought the material back and we were crash editing in my house, in my living room, and my younger son, I never took him to the camp with me because it was just too much to try to deal with, doing the video and taking care of him. But he was 5, and so then we were doing all this editing in the living room, so he knew all those camp songs. Because he was hearing them all the time on the videotapes and everything. I mean, sometimes it got a little tiring, so much processing, but it was really cool too. The people were really consciously thinking about how are we going about this, and that how we go about it is really important experience. I definitely carried a lot of things from it. You know, everything from continuing to do a lot of video and documentation about women's lives in particular, to that feeling of empowerment with all women and what that does. And I haven't actually ended up, I've ended up in a lot of situations with a lot of men, sort of where I feel like I'm kind of holding that the place of the female energy. So it just seems to be what I've attracted. Maybe that will change. But that's happened to me a lot. So I haven't so much lived in all women communities, but I don't know. I just, and trying to think what else. Definitely the whole circle process. I've been part of a dance community that's Dance New England, that's where we do sweat lodges and various things like that, as well as doing a lot of dancing, and that's all. They do things by consensus, or at least they attempt to. And they have peacekeepers and things like that, and so and they try to maintain a community. They've tried to buy land over a long period of time, and it's never really worked out. But that's been one of their goals. I was also part of a collective called Camp Common Ground up in Vermont, which again they did end up buying land, but by then I'd kind of moved on. But our original idea was just to document it and to show the tapes as much as possible to help to publicize it out there, and that's what we were doing. And then we got the offer. I can't really remember clearly how. I mean, I think we were hoping in the long run that we'd get, but probably a lot longer run, down the road, that we'd do a documentary. But we were more at that point. We wanted to get it out there. I mean, one of the things, like I said before, is that it just wasn't showing up in the news. So we had some of our tapes sometimes shown on local news channels, and that was important to us too, just that people know that it was going on, because if you have an action, the more coverage you get of it, the better. Mm-hmm. And I became that I didn't know about the actions going on in England and other places until becoming involved at the camp. So that was a really amazing thing too, just feeling part of a international community, and then with the Nairobi helping to do the fundraising for that, and just seeing the results of that. Now that didn't so much come out with a final product. It came out with a lot of tapes of different women from all different NGOs all over the world talking about their experience and what they saw as feminism, etc., and trying to give them their voice. And so they said it, the way they presented it was more like you'd go into a room and there'd be some slides being shown, and there'd be, several rooms. You'd go to a display, and there'd be slides, and there'd be photos, and there'd be different monitors with the different interviews going on, because all of the interviews themselves were several hours long, or whatever, or an hour long. So a ton of material organized so people could get more out of it than. It was a real struggle, and also an ideological struggle in making Stronger Than Before, because we had to cut out a lot of stuff. Yeah. Because whenever you're editing something, you are biasing it. That's something we became so aware of, and it's really made me aware of a lot of things, but certainly in doing video, etc., that whoever's holding the camera, they're making a ton of decisions about what they're it's not like you're just doing this unbiased documentary. You are choosing your shots, and you can wish put it on silence.
Just wanted you to know it's on silence.
And so that idea that you're, and then, but even more so when you take a bunch of tapes and you have to make them into a 1 hour or 55 minutes or 50 minutes, I forget the exact length, because they had to fit it in within their programming. So I remember we had to make it
Stronger Than Before.
Yeah, Stronger Than
27 minutes.
Oh, 27. Oh my God, it was a half hour. I didn't even remember that.
Managed to do that.
Yeah, so we had to figure out. So editing was really tough, and it really meant the people most involved in the editing were making a lot of choices about what would show up. And we did try. And here the process of having to do things in a rush did take over. So the people who did more, they made more decisions. And that's just the way it was, But they did try. They tried to show it to a bunch of people in the collective and outside the collective, and get opinions about, about the balance that we had.
Do you remember at the time, did you all think that was going to be it? Like that would be what you produced out of all of the summer and the work? Or did you have any sense you'd like to do a longer one with more time?
I think we definitely wanted to do a longer one. I think we wanted to also have things available. I think we did do some kind of presentations where we had more like the Nairobi one, more like photos and slides, and then of course Judy's held on to all these things all these years, all the tapes and everything. I guess there was a sense that we'd like to do more, but then it's kind of like things move along, and everyone moved along, and they were doing other projects, so it really, no other longer tape was produced. In Boston, we did a lot of showing at different organizations, peace organizations, and women's organizations, and different places with, I would just bring a bunch of 25-inch monitors from where I worked and daisy chain them together, because at the time, video projectors were much more expensive and much less good than they are now. So anyway, mostly we did that. We'd show, so we'd be hauling a lot of equipment to show things. And then, and part of the process too was actually just showing things to the women at the camp, because that was very, people got excited when they saw the videotape of them and what they were doing, and I think it was very inspiring to them themselves. So we showed various rushes on, tapes, field tapes, on monitors, and then one time I also actually brought a little video projector and set it up and got it going. And showed, I think it was in the barn. I showed to a big audience.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. People loved it. And it was, I don't know if, I don't know if that was closer to a finished product at that time, or if it was just more field tapes. But since it is so theatrical and it is so amazing, and since there were so many different women involved who were coming at different times,
right,
who weren't necessarily there for the whole thing, to see all this, to see it on videotape, I think was great for the women there.
How did you organize your life back then so you could spend time at the camp? Do you remember?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know. I took my vacation, I think, to do the July 4th week. And then I must have taken, I worked at a video company, and I just asked for time off. I took a lot of time off that year. I went up in the fall too, around Labor Day, I guess. I think that was the second time I went up, I'm not sure. Some women in the collective stayed, a month or two. Some women went down really early to work with the people who were planning the camp. And so there was a big range in and that was one of the good things, again, about having people involved. Some people never got to the camp who were very involved. And very much part of the process,
right,
of getting the documentation done.
How did you communicate? Do you remember anything about the structure of your meetings, or how you guys stayed, if there's somewhere on the land and somewhere here, and did you have weekly meetings? How did you process? Do you remember?
I don't remember a lot about that. Chantal would be better at that, or Judy, or Claire probably, or Martha. I know we were on the phone somewhat. We definitely have meetings when we came back. I think there were probably weekly meetings, at least weekly meetings going on during the summer. And we had minutes. I know somewhere I have. Sometimes when I go through my papers, I would find like piles of minutes from Women's Video Collective meetings. So we'd get them out to everyone. And this was pre-internet too. Not pre, we weren't on the internet, whatever. We couldn't just email each other and send the minutes out that way. So I don't know exactly, I come to think of it, I don't really know. I guess we passed them out to each other. Well, the women were doing that, it was one of the ones that I covered, which was like at dawn, I think, was, so I think it was, I don't know how the videotape came out of it, because it was pretty low light. And we didn't have like low light cameras either. Everything was pretty low tech. But anyway, I can't remember exactly, but the women, I think they were pouring red paint for blood around, but not in and they had a lot of the different, they've all kind of run into together, basically. Oh, I remember, I definitely was part of covering a lot of women going over the fence, so we'd have a lot of documentation of women going over the fence and people cheering them on. And there was a lot of talk within the collective, because some people wanted to go over the fence, but obviously we couldn't all do that because we had equipment from everyone, and we had to stay on the other side and do the documentary. So that became an issue for some of the women. Some of the women did get arrested, and then we covered, I guess that's in Stronger Than Before, we covered, did it get in there? No, I haven't seen it in a while, but we covered some of the trials and things like that, and that was all very interesting too. But I know one in particular was when the Peace Walk walked into the camp. I was on holding the microphone for the woman running the camera at that time, and we were just trying to move with the parade or procession as it came in, and the walkers, and it was so moving. It was so amazing. I mean, there was just such a power in these women and the monks coming in, the way they had walked so far, and their energy was amazing. So I remember that in particular. I remember just being in tears. I remember being in tears a lot when I was trying to run a camera because it was so powerful. What people were saying and doing, and the way they were holding themselves and their energy and their fields, and the strength, the incredible strength of these women. And it was amazing. A lot of older women went over the fence, and in fact, there was kind of a joke when we were editing because it was like, we can only edit older women. We can only use older women with beards and mustaches or whatever. And if a young person is actually being gets up to talk on the tape, they have to have an older person standing behind them. Because that's just the way it happened to be, in a lot of the footage. That's the way it was. And it was an incredible inspiration to have the WILF women, women who'd been doing this, since World War I practically, or the whole history of women influencing, trying to bring, peace to their, trying to change the culture that we lived in. And so that was very powerful, and great to have all the different ages all working together, and people from all different parts of the country, and people with very different, different kinds of women, very professional, kind of slick types, and very country types, and all different people, coming from different angles, and that was great. And we got quite a bit of that on the videotape. Also, the whole issue with the flags, that was a big one. I was there for that because it was I was there around July 4th, so that was amazing to see the creativity. Like, it seemed like an all or nothing thing. It seemed like this man was demanding we put the flag up, and the American flag, and the camp was going to have to refuse, and it was just going to be, a fight. And then women said, oh no, we can just make flags. We can make all kinds of flags. And that was a wonderful thing.
Did you have to wrestle with the idea of getting arrested or taking a more active part in that?
I was pretty clear I wasn't going to do that. I was a single mom of a 5-year-old, and a lot of the equipment I had borrowed personally and, had vouched for, so...
Wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't going to happen. I mean, maybe that was just an excuse, but whatever. I didn't really even go down that road, but I had friends who definitely were very torn, or who actually, just took part in actions. Mm-hmm. So I kind of remained more on the, the side of the camera I'm not on now, behind the camera. That was much more my role. Very scared of the intensity of the anger. There was a lot of people, the nuke the lesis and nuke them till they glow, and I remember just being like kind of horrified that people really, would think that way, and it was scary sometimes. But then there were also people who would come up to me, and women, usually women, who would just come up to us and say, "This is so great, I've learned so much from this, and this has opened me up, and I've really made a big turnaround in my whole life because of this." So, there was, and people who also just said things, "I'm so glad you're doing this, I'm glad that attention is being brought to the transshipment of the nuclear arms," or, when there was the women's walk in Seneca Falls, that, people were happy to have more attentions being brought to the history there, women's rights and women's suffrage, and then women contributing to the peace movement. And so, yeah, there were many women who were and some men too, who we had conversations with, maybe just sometimes because we were holding cameras or whatever, they'd come up and say to us, like, this is just so amazing or so moving, and some of them, also, of course, did their own actions and did their own, participated in the march on Seneca Falls, and then they were like, but they said, we wouldn't have been doing this if the peace camp women hadn't come and started doing these actions. We wouldn't have thought about it, and now we're doing it. Or some people who were doing things, but they're like, we're so glad that there's more attention on it, more people, more support for this. Well, and I could see that if because there was, the community was pretty hostile. Some of the community was pretty hostile. But that actually, I remember that sometimes we'd be out doing stuff, and people would save us food sometimes, and sometimes they wouldn't. But we didn't always get to eat. But I do remember lots of zucchini bread, tons and tons of, all different dishes with zucchini. I think we had a zucchini song. Probably Claire sang it for you or something. She was the main zucchini person. She lived there much longer than I did, so she was, more aware of that. What I remember also, the porta-janes. And I remember I hated them so much because they stank to high heaven. And so I would go in the woods and pee. And so in the night, in the dark, and I didn't necessarily bring a flashlight, so I ended up with poison ivy on where. I felt that my political involvement ended up moving into a more spiritually oriented political involvement. Like Starhawk or Diane Marie Child or various people, and I ended up studying with them or doing things with them, and so I guess that was an influence from the camp, because the camp was really the first time I'd ever seen any of this kind of approach. So personally, I know it affected me a lot. She was a very strong reason that this happened. And it's very subtle the way she does it. It's actually more like a female principle, She kind of just laid it out there and kind of attracted people in, just through her presence and her dedication and her excitement about covering this material, making sure that it got shown and that it was an all women's group doing it. Power, but not power over as well. That idea. Definitely, she's a powerful person. And so I think when she moved on, to a certain extent, that left a hole as far as doing the Women's Video Collective. Everyone went off and did things, but of their own whatever, not necessarily in media but some people did, obviously. Judy and Claire and other people. Laura Barrett, actually. She went on to do more like journalism things, but again, hopefully influencing from the inside out. I mean, for several years, I remember just asking about it or hearing about it, or I think some members of the collective went and visited, or, I thought about going back there at some point, or I knew people who were, I never got to go back, but, for at least several years, I was aware that they still owned the land, which I thought was really great, and there was still things happening. Well, as usual, I noticed both in our group and at the camp that African Americans were underrepresented, and there were some Native Americans, I think, and then, but it was some Asians, but it tends to be more of a white thing, and maybe that's because we've done more of the harm, and we have the luxury of having the time and energy sometimes to be able to participate in things like this. I remember meeting this woman. I don't know if it got on tape or not, or if it was just a conversation. But this woman, a black woman, was doing childcare and she was like really upset because there was no shade, I guess. I don't know how this could have exactly happened, but I guess at the time it wasn't a roof over the place that they had for childcare, and they couldn't get in out of the sun, and it was really hot, and she had gotten a terrible sunburn, and she was like, I got a sunburn. You know, I mean, not, of course, the black people can't get sunburns, but it's harder. It's a little bit harder. In the collective itself, there were women who were lesbians, women who weren't lesbians, and that didn't seem to be a big issue at all. I mean, it was obvious that a lot of the women who were lesbians at the camp were some of the stronger, you know, women. I mean, they were more. They were some of the leaders. Let's put it that way, and. Some of the people who really put a lot of energy behind the camp. But I, you know, in my experiences, and I don't know what we got on tape about it, but that didn't seem to be a big divisive issue. I mean, people did break down into affinity groups and things and talk about how their experiences were at camp and elsewhere and in working in peace movement and stuff were being affected by being either gay, straight, or bi, or I don't remember much about racial stuff. There might be some stuff on the. We did get to tape some people who allowed us to tape these smaller groups that were meeting on the land. You know, that were talking about all these topics. One I remember in particular, what I do remember is there was a group on working class women and how they felt compared to other women. You know, what their issues were. They wanted to, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think they didn't want us to videotape it, or maybe only parts of it, which is, you know, fine. I mean, I think it was, so class issues, you know, were being looked at, which, you know, it was all, of course, really very necessary and exciting, because, in a way, but, you know, necessary because of the whole way the political movements of the 60s and 70s, well, of course, the women started in the 70s for sure, but it just, I guess the fruition in the early 80s with like the peace encampment, that there were just, again, the way the process was happening, the way it was happening often in a racist and sexist way. So certainly going to the camp was very opening for me around all those issues, and participating in the Women's Video Collective, because like I said, it was very much you know, how much do you give up to get a product within a certain time, and we had to deal with that throughout. You know, and even when we did when the other subgroup did the women's women in poverty tape, even though we didn't have a particular deadline in some ways, although we did it in conjunction with a conference that they had at UMass Boston. So they wanted to see something come out of it within a certain period of time. And then after a certain, and then you have an urge to, you know, get through it too at a certain point.
Right.
You know, and so, and when we were editing that one, we had babies crawling around. And I remember because in the 1-inch editing room at UMass, they had like trays of rat poison down in corners so we had to we can't let them crawl around here, you know. Things like that. So there was the ongoing issues of how do you know, have children and take care of them and do the work and you know, make money and
right.
Get and how long do you wait? You know, how much do you press to finally get the product out? Because it is really hard to get a product out without at least getting into somewhat of an adrenaline mode somewhere along the line, where someone is going to step forward and kind of like just sort of take charge and sort of really do it in a different way. It's a challenge. Well, that was the good thing about the collective, though, that there was such a that there were women involved on all levels, and some women did all of it, you know, but some women really, you know, just basically were supportive. Did helped with fundraising, helped set up showings, helped, like I said, helped earlier, you know, helped made food, so while the women were crash editing, they could have food, you know.
Yeah.
How many women would you say were involved?
I think at the height of it, there were a lot of women involved, at least peripherally. So it brought in a lot of people. Yeah, it's that ripple that I'm sure went, for any women that went to the camp. But there's a kind of ripple effect of just feeling more empowered. Like, that's what I mean by saying it was so great to have an all-women crew, because you felt like you could do this on your own. You could figure it out. I probably would never have ended up applying for the job to get to be the coordinator, the education coordinator and outreach coordinator at the Medford Community Cable if I hadn't done the work with the Women's Video Collective. And in fact, one of the things that got me the job was that I had we'd won a prize for the women's Women in Poverty tape that we did. Just a cable, in cable. It was never on broadcast, but it was cable. And so the woman who gave me the job, that was one of the things she looked at. And then it was all just very strange, because I ended up being basically the person who was coordinating these women who were in the regular media and having all these discussions with them about what it was, what it was like, and the different values that I'd picked up being in the Women's Video Collective. They'd come up right through, like Channel 7 or Channel 5 or whatever. So it was pretty interesting. Oh, and then at a certain point, the technician, we used to do the City Hall, the council meetings, and cover them. And we had a mobile van, and we did a 3-camera shoot. And the technician actually dropped dead while he was training people from a heart attack. And he was a guy, naturally. I mean, a nice guy. I was very sorry to see him go. But I actually covered for several months and did all the technical work. I just learned to do all the technical work in the van. And I'd go park the van at 2 in the morning in a marina, this 20-foot van, among all these tractor-trailer trucks and everything. And I think a lot of that was, just having been through the camp experience. I felt like, yeah, I can do this. Of course, they still gave some young guy my job as soon as I got funding. She promised me, my boss promised me, that I was doing it on my regular salary, which meant that I was working about twice the hours I was supposed to work, because I wasn't getting out, I was supposed to get out at 11, and I wasn't getting out till 2 in the morning. And then once they got once the city actually gave them a contract to be paid to do this work, she gave the job to a young guy, so I quit. But I learned a lot in the process, It's just having that, self-confidence. I can figure this out. I can do the basic engineering for this. And that, definitely came from just doing the basic technical stuff for the collective. I knew Claire and other people originally from this Somerville Community Access TV show called, the producers, or I'm forgetting now. Anyway, there was a the producers group did a live show every week. I think it was every week, maybe it was every other week. I was peripherally involved with that group. I wasn't a regular member, but I came in and actually brought equipment from my company a few times, and was connected through a man I knew who was part of the group, and that's how I got involved. That's how I got to know Claire. But what I would notice, I mean, this was like on a small level, a resistance against the patriarchy which existed in that group. I mean, that group was a live show, and inevitably there was, we were rushing to get everything done. So when it really came to who did what right before lights, camera, action, it was the guys, and they somehow never really found the time to train the women to do it. So when I was doing training at Medford, I was really clear that I tried to provide a different kind of atmosphere where everyone got a chance to get trained. It's a little mild version of resisting the patriarchy. And then, but not so mild when you consider how much the media controls our perspective about what's going on in the world.